Hello everybody, it is Sunday, August the 9th, and in this session I'm going to show how I measured out a vintage dress and I documented the measurements, and I'm duplicating those measurements in the pattern editor to recreate a pattern of the entire dress. So I'm going to go into screen share so that I can show you the pictures of the dress and show you my rudimentary markups, and then show you. Hello everybody, it is Sunday here, and then I'll show you in Pattern Editor how I made those measurements and created the complete pattern. So I'm going to go into screen share. If anybody wants to be invited to participate live, you can request an invitation over at Google+, and possibly even YouTube. I'm still on a learning curve with this. If you don't want to participate live and you have questions, you can just go to the question and answer feature, and I'll see your question up here on the screen and try to address any questions as I'm working. And that's if you don't want to participate live, which is fine too. So I'm going to move on to screen share and get started. And we can move me out of the way here. I'm going to start with what happens to be on the screen now is the actual block of the pattern that I'm working on, but I'm going to show you the actual dress so that you can see what we are working with. So this is the back of the dress. It is a dolman style dress where the sleeve is cut on. You can see it has a long zipper, and the bodice extends into sort of a back, kind of, I call it a butt yoke, kind of a back yoke shape. And coming to the front of the dress here, again, we have the dolman style. There is a waist seam. Now this entire skirt here at the bottom, it's one piece that wraps all the way around to the back. So it's only one piece, center front going all the way to center back. So there's only a center back seam. And what happens is we have these horizontal tucks or pleats that go across the front. They're about 8 inches stitched down. They're about, I think, 3/4 to 5/8 of an inch deep. And so these continue around to the sides, going back around, going into the booty yoke there. And then we have vertical pleats going to the bottom through here. So the draft is going to consist of a front bodice. There's gathers here at the sleeves, and we'll look at that in a moment. And there's also 2 French darts at the sides, and we also have a very unusual collar. I've never seen this collar before in my life. It's winged in shape, has 2 pleats coming out of it in the front here, and the back actually has a little piece of boning or a collar stand, so it actually hikes up very dramatically and then plunges back down over these pleats. It looks more complicated than it really is. Once I laid it out flat, it was actually quite simple, but I'm sure however long ago this dress was made, I'm sure it was kind of a complex feature at the time. Now here I laid the garment flat on a grid board. Unfortunately, the garment is black, so it was probably not, it didn't photograph well, so I marked up my measurements, which we'll go over in the draft and pattern editor. Using a grid board is very handy to help you square everything off. I marked my center front, the high point of the shoulder at neck here down to waist, my waist measurement. I took measurements for the 2 French darts. And there's also, this is the cut-on dolman sleeve. And there's a slash here, 2.5 inches. And the reason for that slash is because there is an underarm gusset, so that there is more movement. And then there's also gathers here at the cuff, at the outer edge and the lower edge. And on another notepad, I have the amount of gathers marked. It's actually 4.5 inches up is where the gathers start, and then those fan out to a total of 7 inches. And let me see if I can get this collar a little closer for you. A better view. Oops. Here is the actual collar draft. This is the inside view and a facing here. In this case, I didn't take a lot of measurements because I used my grid board as a guide to take a really good straight-on photograph, and each of these squares is 1 inch. So when I go to draft this collar, I'm pretty much just going to bring the picture in and draft onto the picture by scaling it up exactly 1 inch. And I have my 2 pleats here. Each of them are 3/8 of an inch deep. I did this little echo line here to show where that little piece of boning acts as a collar stand to give the collar its shape. And what I will do, I did the, let's see any other pictures here. This is the inside hip area. Inside the hip, they did a flat piece of fabric just kind of hanging from the waist there, and that was used to do a few floating tacks at the side waist to keep the pleats in place. This is my notation on the pleats being stitched down at about 8 inches across, and at the beginning and end of each pleat there is actually a vertical top stitch to keep it down and nice and neat. I pretty much have blocked out the front bodice and the back bodice. The skirt is still a work in progress, but I'll give you a rundown on it and we'll be drafting it together. I have 7 inches and 7 inches to the back, even though it says 6.5 here. There is a little back dart in the bodice, so when working on my draft, I'm eliminating that. And then my pleats start 1.5 inches from the top, and this is the center front over here, and they span out across center front, across the sides, to the back little booty yoke, as I call it. Each pleat is about 5/8 of an inch apart from each other. So you probably have already guessed when we work on the block for this, we're going to draft in the lines for our pleats, and we're going to do some slash and spread action. This is my notation here that from front to back, going through to the bottom of the yoke, I had a total of about 17 inches. My top to bottom here, 30.5 inches. And just laying the sweep is the span of the hem here, just laying it flat, I had approximately 21 inches up to about the 17-inch mark. But then when I fanned all of this out, I had another 27 inches. So it's actually, it's an incredibly full skirt that we'll have to see if it works out being cut on wide goods on the straight grain, or this might have had to have been a cross grain situation. Let me see if I can get closer here on this. The writing's not perfectly legible, but you see we have 3 pleats in the back, and they actually fold going back towards the center of the garment, of the fold of the pleats there. I have 3 of them, and they're each about they're 3/4 of an inch apart and 3 inches deep. So where my pleats at the top here are just going to be a slash and spread situation because I have an even 5/8 of an inch deep pleat on each one of these going horizontally. The bottom here is going to be a different situation. I am going to have my slash marks for the pleat, But since the bottom here is going to fan out so voluminously, I'm going to do more of a slash spread slash pivot behavior for this to circle out. And what happens back here is the center back becomes decidedly on the bias, whereas the center front here is going to stay on the grain, straight grain or cross grain, depending on what we can fit out of it. So that takes care of the overview of what we have, and maybe it'll help you if I was going to say have the picture up, but you probably have a good idea of what we're looking at now because of the overview. So I'm going to copy this, and we're going to go over the specifications of the measurements I made to the actual garment. And this is actually true to scale, so it'll be handy to use my specification tool to measure this out for you. So I'm going to measure each of these lines so that you can see, and they correspond with the measurements of the garment when I laid it flat. And then I'm going to draft each of these lines and arcs one by one so you can see how I went from the garment measurements to actually drafting here in Pattern Editor. So I'm going to start with my specification tool. You would not be starting with your specification tool because you would be drafting from scratch. In this case, I'm just using specification tool to show you the finished measurements of the garment block. So specifications here, my center front neck to my waist is 14 inches. And I'm going to do these a little larger so you can see. So that's 14 inches. My shoulder to waist, when I measured the garment, is 16.5 inches. My neck opening on the half, I believe that was 3.25 inch. Now the next thing that I measured was from the center front to where my shoulder angle started to peak down a little bit. And that measurement, and this is again where a grid comes in really handy when you're laying your garment flat and pinning it down to measure it. So at 9.25 inches from the center front here, this is called the shoulder drop, and that was 2 3/8. Now that was here at this location, 9.25 inches away from the center front. And again, these are mirroring the measurements that I took off of the garment. Now my next measurement was the drop from the high point shoulder location to the end of the sleeve. That was about 9.75. But when I draft it, sometimes things move and shift around, which is fine. It'll true up in a way that makes the most sense. When you're working with a shifty garment that's already been sewn together, measurements are going to sometimes conflict with each other a little bit once you get it all down on paper, but getting close enough in the ballpark is what you're after. You don't obsess over every 16th of an inch, because the garment, especially a vintage garment that's aged and been worn and gravity has affected it, it's going to do some different sort of things there. All right, so I have my two lengths here. Another one to have handy is from here to here is 6 inches. So 6 inches over tells me that this line here is approximately 6 inches. That's where I did my shoulder drop, and then my high point shoulder level. Remember, high point shoulder is right up here, down to the sleeve edge. Then this is squared off meaning a right angle, 4.5 inches. My total waist, which is from center front to right here, is 7 inches. My two darts, my dart starts 1 inch from the waist level here, and it's a 6-inch dart. And this obviously is not a dart right now. Right now, it's just a style line showing where my darts will go. The darts happen to be 5/8 of an inch away from each other, exactly parallel. And you might be thinking, oh, when it comes to the dart, perhaps I can just slash and pivot on each one. And I'm going to show you the wrong way to address these two darts and a right way to address them. The wrong way will not have them be exactly parallel to each other. The right way, or my bootleg way, if you will have them exactly parallel. So I'm just going to mark these. And all these markings that I'm doing for the points of measure on this block, I'm going to be posting those to a public Evernote link, so you can pull this up and you can follow along. And if you want to do this as a practice lesson, you can also draft this from scratch. And as you can see, it's really just all numbers. And in Pattern Editor, you can draw lines and arcs without having to use, obviously, a pencil and a ruler. You just do a flick of a line, tell it how long you want the line to be and in which direction, and it automatically does it for you. So in many ways, it's actually more accurate than using real paper, a real ruler, and a real pencil. Now, 3 inches over from my waist edge, I squared off a measurement when I had this pinned down to the grid board, and I learned 3 inches over. I go exactly 5.75 inches up, and that becomes the location of my slash line where the gusset is going to be sewn in, the underarm gusset. Now, my chest width on the actual garment, I'm calling this armpit, even though it's not really a regular armpit seam. It is where the gusset location line is. So my chest measurement or bust measurement from pit to pit was 20 inches. I think it was, yeah, it was 20 inches. So on the half, that's going to be 10 inches. So we have a lot of measurements here telling us how to draft that particular bodice that was pinned down. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go through the activity of drafting this block. And this block started out as just a photograph that I did of my garment pinned down on my grid board. And I wrote over the garment, measuring all the points with actually a real tape measure, and then I just noted them. In this instance, I know the collar I showed you was pretty straight on photograph, and I'm just going to draft it from the photograph. But my other photos of the garment, even though they're on the grid, I didn't measure them on the photograph. I measured the actual garment, and I made notations to the actual photograph, if that makes sense. All right, so let's go with our drafting. Let me see if I can get a better zoom here with zoom window. Okay, so let's start with the high point shoulder to the waist, and that's 16.5 inches. Now, there's two ways that I can go about that. I can literally just draw a line that's 16.5 inches, or I can start doing what I call boxing out the block. By boxing out the block, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to start drawing angular lines just to get me started and use offset instead of locate point. So let me do the two ways so that you can see the difference. I'm sorry, draw a specific line. So drawing a specific line, 16.5 inches. My LI command, click, bring the line down. I'm typing in 16.5 and I'm hitting enter. So that's one way of going about it. And I can continue doing that for all these other lines, but for me, that's a little bit slower than using my offset command to offset a line a particular distance from another line. So I'm going to show you how I've evolved to doing that. I'm going to erase this. I'm just going to draw myself a nice long line straight across. Doesn't mean anything. I'm just starting to square out some box shapes. Now I'm going to use my offset tool for the 16.5 inches, and I want the 16.5 inches because that's my high point shoulder down to my waist level. So that's going to be the longest distance of my boxed shape here right now. So I'm going to offset OF 16.5 and I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to click on the line that I want to offset and drag my mouse the direction I want that offset to go. So now I have high point shoulder to my waist level. Now, since I'm already 16.5 inches in my distance here, so I don't have to measure anything. I already offset it, but I do want a center front line. Don't have to do anything special other than LI for line, right click, snap, snap. So I have that. Now, back again. Our neck opening on the half, because this is our centered front, our neck opening is 3.25 inches. I could do locate point, select this line, snap to the end, type in 3.25 and locate the construction point, and then after that, draw a line. And over the years of working with this program, that's become too much work for me. For me, it's a shortcut to just use offset. So I'm going to offset 3.25 inches from the centered front here. Maybe I should show you both ways so that you can decide which is best for you, and it's also good practice. So here's the one way, locate point. I need 3.25 inches for my neck opening on the half. I'm selecting a line, LP for locate point, snap to end point to measure from. So I snap, which is the right click. I'm going to type in 3.25, and click apply. There's my little construction point, 3.25 from the center front, and now I can draw a line going straight down here. I could intersect it IN if I want to there. So again, for me, that's more work than I like. It seems more intuitive for me to just do OF 3.25, apply, drag it over. So now I have my neck opening location, and continuing, my distance for the center front from the waist to the neck is 14 inches, so I'm going to mark that. I could also have measured my front neck drop from the high point shoulder. As long as you do either one, either your front neck drop from the high point shoulder location or your waist to the center front neck, as long as you end up getting one of those measurements, you can extrapolate the second. So I'm going to offset 14 inches from the bottom, OF, 14, apply. Now what I've done here is I have my neck opening, high point shoulder, the location of my center front neck. So now it's not a big deal at all to snap an arc in here, representing my front neck opening. So for arc, we simply do AR, snap, which is right click, snap, which is right click, And what you want to do is you want your center front to come in to a pretty smooth landing, like an airplane going zoom. You don't want it to nosedive and be really pointy, unless you are, of course, doing a V neckline. But in this instance, with me analyzing the garment, it's not a very roundy neck. It barely comes in to a curve at the center front, likely because of the special collar design. So I have my high point shoulder, my neck opening, my front neck drop, my waist position, my waist to my center front neck. Now, I know that from measuring the garment and documenting that if I go 6 inches over and 2.375 inches down, that I will be able to snap in my shoulder line just the way the garment actually was. So I'm going to go over 6 inches. And I think you know now I like using offset, OF, 6 inches. 6 inches over there, and then I needed to go down, I forgot already. I needed to go down 2.375 as my shoulder drop in that location. So 2.375, 2.375. I'm going to click apply, and I'm going to go down. That's not too far from the neck position, so I'm going to get rid of that second line there so that I don't get myself in trouble. Come on, zoom window. All right, so I can snap here because that's actually a construction point. I'm going to turn on construction points for a minute. CP for construction point. You can probably barely see the little tiny X's there. But I, of course, have one here because it's the end of my arc, and it also is the end of my high point shoulder to waist line here. But there is no construction point right here. So it's not going to do me any good. This cross point right here, there's nothing to snap to. There's no location point. So even though I can snap here, and I could use a left click to end my shoulder line here, kind of sort of accurately, but it's not really going to be accurate because left click will start or stop a line or arc anywhere your mouse just happens to be. So I do want a construction point here. So a quick and easy way to do that is I'm going to use intersect, IN, click, click. So now I have a little construction point because that ends the line. So it's now as simple as LI command, snap, snap. So I've taken care of my shoulder line here. Now I need 9.717. It really was 9.75, but things moved around a little bit. So OF, 9. Oh, we might as well do 9.75 because that's what it really was in the first place. So I'm going to click apply, and it's 9.75 inches from the high point shoulder. So that's where I'm offsetting from. And now I can continue from the edge of my shoulder, LI, snap, snap. That doesn't look right. Oh, sorry. Remember that nice long line I drew for no apparent reason? Start boxing things out. I got a little crazy there. This line here is supposed to be 14 inches, and it's supposed to intersect 9.75 from the high point shoulder. So this is where the inconsistency came from. My method for doing that was to draw a 14-inch line, and I'm just going to let it land anywhere at the moment. So I snapped my line to the end of the shoulder, dragging it out. It doesn't matter where it is at this point because I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to type in 14 inches, and I'm going to hit enter. So when I measured my garment, the shoulder line here, the shoulder drop here, the 14-inch length those were absolute exacting measurements to the garment. The distance from the high point shoulder level here to the edge of where the sleeve began was a little bit of a gray area depending on how you arranged that garment. By now, with the gusset and the age of the garment, trying to read the opposing grain lines was just all shot to heck. So there's a little massage, little gray area there on where that lands. But I do know this has to be 14 inches. The distance from the high point shoulder level can be a little arbitrary. So I'm going to highlight my 14-inch line, and I'm going to rotate it from here till it right about hits at my 9.75 inches. Obviously what happened is when I drafted this the first time based off the measurements and I rotated this, I didn't hit right smack at 9.75, which is fine as I explained. So now I've selected this line. I'm going to rotate by using my RO tool. And you probably know that I'm a keyboard shortcut fan. So RO is for rotate. But somewhere in these buttons is the actual rotate tool. I don't know where it is. Or it's going to be in, here we go. It's in tools. The rotate button is that icon right there, which is this guy up here. So you're going to memorize as you work with the program. You're going to remember the commands and use the commands in whatever way works best for you. Some of you will be visual button pushers. Some of you will like to go to the drop-down menus, and some of you will like the keyboard shortcuts. But if you pay attention, tools, the icon, the shortcut, you'll start to work with whatever way is more intuitive to you. So back to rotate, RO for me, and whenever I'm smacking on the keyboard here with shortcuts, you can always look up in the upper left-hand side and you'll be able to see what I was doing and then also see the prompt for that command. Another thing I wanted to mention while I'm here is I'm using a rather high screen resolution, which may give you a small drop-down menu, small icons. If you play this video back on YouTube, make sure that your little gear button in the lower right-hand side for playback is set to the highest definition that's available for your computer speed. So rotate, snap, click or snap to the pivot point. I'm going to snap here, and my line is still 14 inches. That hasn't changed. What I'm going to do now is I want to rotate it until it meets the line that I had set for 9.75 inches from the high point shoulder. So I'm probably not exactly there. I probably wasn't exactly there the last time. If I want to get, you can see I'm a little distance away. I can live with that because I know the dynamics of this particular garment, so I'm not going to stress over it. It's probably 9.71 inches instead of 9.5, but that's okay. So just so I don't have too many confusing lines, I'm going to get rid of this particular marker there. Now, there's two ways that we can square off a line. 4.5 inches from the edge of the sleeve here. One way is you've seen that I use offset quite a bit. And in this case, I need this to be perfectly squared off. So I can't just kind of arbitrarily snap a line and kind of hover and think that I might be squared off. I need to truly be squared off. So if I'm offsetting a line, it will truly square off. Or if I'm in a circumstance where that's not going to work out for me, I can also use, actually in this, my square line, SQ as square for square off, or it's this little icon right here. Now, on this one, I believe I have to select first, then choose the tool. snap to the endpoint from which to square. So I'm snapping from here because I need a perfectly right angle. And I happen to need 4.5 inches. And I need that to, this confuses me, the counterclockwise and the clockwise, because it's radiating or turning from the end of the line that you selected. So for me, sometimes that can be a backwards orientation. So from this, let's see if I get it right this time. From this, I want to swing out a line that's 4.5 inches. So let's see, going this way is counterclockwise. Let's see if I got it right. Counterclockwise, yes I did. That was luck actually. So I have my 4.5 inches that are squared off. Can you see how the draft is starting to take shape from the measurements that I measured off of the garment? All right, so my next thing, I guess, let's see where we are here. 10 inches over. 10 inches over, 5.75 inches up is what I want here. I also had my marker 3 inches. What I'm trying to arrive at, now that I have the end of my sleeve, is from this end to the armpit to armpit location. So I think the easiest is going to be to continue working within my box theory here and go over 3 inches, up 5.75, and this should snap at 10 inches if everything is right. If it's not exact, when I'm drafting off of real life measurements that I took off of a mushy movable garment, it's perfectly fine to kind of massage the numbers a little bit as needed. All right, so just to be sure, oops, sorry for the zooming in and zooming out here. Let's see, I'm going to measure from here to here, and that's 9.25. That's not going to do me any good because that was the location of my shoulder edge. So I'm not going to confuse that with anything that's important, so I'm going to get rid of it. Let me zoom on these two together. So I'm going to go over 7 inches because 7 inches is the width of my waist. Center front, locate point, 7. Or I could have offset 7 inches to get my waist point. I didn't do that, and now I need 3 inches, so now here's an extra step. BR for break, click, snap, snap. So I have my segregated 7 inches. Now I need 3 inches over, locate point, 3, and there's my little construction point right there. Now I need 5.75. LI, snap, drag my mouse up, type in 5.75, hit enter, and there's my 5.75. And I will be 10 inches because 7 inches here and 3 inches is 10, isn't it? 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, it is. Haha. I need a spreadsheet to add up 2 plus 2. It's become really bad. So I am going to draw my 10 inches here. I just drew a line and I'm intersecting it, and it does end up 10 inches. And by the way, if you haven't already noticed this, whenever you click on a line or a group of lines and arcs, not grouped together as in the actual group tool, but if you simultaneously hold down Shift, and I have these 2 lines selected, it gives me the total of those lines. So this line by itself over here is 10 inches. It's really handy when you want to, instead of using your calculator and adding up segments, you can quickly highlight an entire armhole and know what that total armhole is. All right, so I have this location here and this here. Now when I meaning I have my chest point, I have my waist point. Now when I measured the actual garment, I snapped my measuring tape from the armpit to the waist, and then I figured out what the depth of this curve was here if I snapped a straight line. So I will show you what I mean by that and how I'm getting this curve here to match the curve that was actually on the garment. So my armpit to waist, I'm going to snap a straight line, even though the pattern's not going to end up a straight line. And now I'm going to offset that snapped straight line from point to point. I'm going to offset it a 1/2 inch. OF. You know, I never use these radio buttons, and I should. So instead of typing in 0.5, I'm going to actually do what I should have been doing all these years and just hit on the radio button. I'm going to click apply. I'm going to offset. So now I have a guide to help me with that arc. Get rid of that there. AR, snap, snap. I got the rubber band action. And I'm just going to rubber band it until I'm at that 1/2 inch mark. Now I might not be exactly at 1/2 inch. I might be, you know, a 1/16 or 32nd of an inch over or under. It's okay. There's more than that worth of a discrepancy in the real physical garment because it's moving and shifting around. And I can get rid of this line now. So now I have the curve of my waist. Now, when I measured the gathers of the end of the sleeve here, it happened to be 4.5 inches from the edge where the gathers stopped and start. And then it was 7 inches total when I took the measuring tape and I pulled out the ripples of the gathers. I had 7 inches. But right now this is the finished actual measurement. And a little lower down from when I squared off the 4.5 inches up here, I had almost 5 inches worth. So I'm going to use that as a guide to draw in my sleeve shape here. So it's not as easy as snapping from this point to this point over here. That wouldn't work well. And it wasn't squared off exactly 4.5 inches over here either. So that's where in my notations these extra measurements help me get the shape of what that garment really was. So right now I'm going to offset 4.5 inches from the bottom because that is how far over my gathers happened. And I'm going to go 5 inches. I know this over here was not 5 inches, but it should have been. That's what it is in my notes anyway. So I can either offset 5 inches here and extend this line to the 5 inch point and then smooth it out. I might have shaved off a little here to get a prettier curve, but we'll see how that pans out. So I'm going to do the offset. Since I already have the offset window open, I'm going to change that to 5 inches. So now I'm going to intersect this line to this line. So those are my 5 inches there. I really don't need this line anymore. So 5 inches to 4.5 inches, and this is offset 4.5 inches because that's the distance of my gathers. So let's just see what happens with a little arc there. And now an arc here. I can live with that. That looks fairly smooth. A lot of it's going to get lost in the gathers anyway, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this part here. So I don't necessarily need this line anymore. Now, when I took my notes for the actual garment, the line for the slash of the armpit where the gusset goes happened to appear to go in the exact direction of the high point shoulder. So I'm going to snap a line from the armpit to the high point shoulder, and it happened to be 2.5 inches. So I'm going to locate point, snap to the end here, 2.5, and I'm going to click apply. And a lot of these numbers that I know I don't have 2.5 written here, but 2.5 was on my notes. And I think that radiated straight. Sorry about that. Second guessing myself. I'm just going to take a look here. Yes, it did. Oh no, I'm crashed.